예, 만프레드 피세딕 푸프탈 연구소 부소장님께서 독일의 에너지 전환 현황, 기회와 도전, 양적 질적 측면 일자리와 구조적 변화라는 제목으로 발표해 주시겠습니다.
So good morning everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here and thank you much for the invitation and the kind introduction. So let me directly start having the time constraints in mind. So while Rainer presented the global and European figures and the framework, let me do a kind of deep dive and let me go into the energy transition pathway of my home country, Germany. And of course, please allow me not only to speak about renewables, but to speak about the broader context of the energy transition pathway. And let's address a little bit what we have in the title of the forum here, Challenges and Opportunities. So let me just start with setting the scene and let me just provide you some figures where Germany is standing at the moment when it comes to the primary energy mix, because that's important to understand the challenges behind the energy transformation pathway. So at the moment, Germany still has a very diversified primary energy structure, still conventional energy carriers like natural gas, oil and coal play a very important role in the primary energy mix. And you see the yellow, the orange bar, that's the renewables being responsible at the moment for roughly 14% of the primary energy mix in Germany. When it comes to the electricity mix, we are much more advanced with regard to renewables. The renewables have been in 2018 for the first time the most important source for electricity generation. And with regard to the electricity generation, renewables covered roughly 35%. When you compare the electricity generation based on renewables with the overall electricity demand, renewables have covered already more than 40% of electricity demand in Germany. So a huge dynamic increase of renewables over the last 15 years in the electricity sector. Just to remind you, in 2000 we started with roughly 5% of renewables in the electricity sector. Last year we had for the first time significantly more than 1/3 in the electricity portfolio. But still, of course, coal and somehow nuclear play an important role in that context. From the policy point of view, the starting point for what we call the Energiewende, it's a German frame, translated that means the energy transformation pathway, that started with launching the energy concept in 2010 and 2011. Just to highlight the most important goals, first of all, we have a greenhouse gas mitigation goal saying that Germany is trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions between 80 and 95% until the middle of the century. That was the goal in the energy concept that was launched in 2010. In addition to that, after the Fukushima accidents happened in March 2011, there was a decision of the German government to phase out nuclear power plants within a step-by-step process so that the last nuclear power plant will stop operation in Germany in 2022. In the energy concept, we have a lot of specific milestones with regard to primary energy demand reduction and with regard to a further increase of the share of renewables in the primary energy system, but in the electricity system in particular, but I will not go into too much details at the moment. It was clearly noted in the energy concept that these goals should be achieved while guaranteeing competitiveness of the German economy and by taking social concerns and system stability into consideration. We have set a 2020 goal with the energy concept in 2010, and the 2020 goal was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% in comparison to 1990 level. Unfortunately, I have to say that the country will not be able, most likely will not be able to achieve that goal by 2020. Most likely we will have 32 or maybe 34% reduction in 2020 compared to 1990 level, but there will be a significant climate protection gap between where we want to be in 2020 and where we are most likely will be in 2020. One of the main reasons behind that is the coal policy in Germany in former days, and the CO2 price in the European trading system. So what you see here is the contribution of the different conventional fuels and electricity system to greenhouse gas emissions in Germany. And what you can see is the more or less stable block coming from lignite-fired power plants. Particularly in this area, in the last 20 years, more or less nothing changed. And having this stable block, which is responsible for roughly 1/6 of the German greenhouse gas emissions, you can imagine that it's hard to achieve a 40% reduction target when one very important block is stable. The reason behind that was, of course, very low CO2 prices in the emission trading system, and that significantly changed in the last year and in 2019, so that we can expect that even lignite and hard coal will go down in the next years. But in former days, that was a main factor for not being able to achieve the 2020 target. So that was, of course, for the German government a clear signal to go into more details and to do more, present more actions with regard to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. The necessity to be more active became even more clear through a couple of more activities, particularly the big movement of the young generation. That is a big discussion in Germany ongoing, and that, of course, triggered and pushed the German government to do more with regard to climate change and to reduce greenhouse gas emission. In addition to that, we have a movement in the industry sector. So more and more industry companies came out with specific greenhouse gas mitigation goals. The most progressive goals from the company Bosch, which is a component deliverer for the automobile manufacturing industry. So Bosch set a goal to achieve a greenhouse gas neutrality by 2020, in the next year already. We have specific goals by big car manufacturer like Daimler, for instance, and we have even goals for energy-intensive industries like the steel industry, ThyssenKrupp. They want to be greenhouse gas neutral by 2050. So even from the industry, there comes enormous pressure to do more on the national scale to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that was, of course, a triggering element for the German government to really to do more and to decide to come up with a climate protection law and to provide a climate protection program for 2030. And these both have been decided so far by the federal cabinet just 2 weeks ago. So the energy climate protection, the climate protection law, is a very complex law, of course, so I will not go to any kind of details, but just to highlight some of the most important figures. First of all, in the climate protection law, you will find a specific goal for greenhouse gas mitigation in 2030. Here the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55%, again in comparison to 1990 level. There's a clear signal that Germany will aiming for greenhouse gas neutrality until 2050, but also set into words in the climate protection law that's now on the table in Germany. Very important is that in that law we will have for the first time sector-specific targets for each of the sectors, for the transport sector, the building sector, the industry sector, and that, of course, put those sectors under more pressure than they have been before. In the climate protection program, when it comes to renewables, it's most important to highlight that there's a clear further market deployment goal for renewables. Here the idea of the German government is to have at least 65% renewables in the electricity sector by 2030. So again, a very ambitious goal. It's important to say that this goal, this target for 2030, particularly the greenhouse gas mitigation target, is not only a voluntary target as it was the case for the 2020 target. We have a strong commitment to the European Union to achieve the 2030 target. In other words, that means if we fail, it will cost us a lot of money. So that means that the quality of the commitment is much higher than for the 2020 target. Of course, you can imagine to go in that direction, to implement such kind of aggressive and ambitious transformation pathway in the energy system is associated with a lot of challenges. I will not go into any kind of detail, but just highlight the most important challenges. Of course, we have a technological challenge when it comes to system integration of renewables and how to deal with these nice fluctuations and volatile supply characteristics, particularly of PV and wind. We have an infrastructure challenge because we have to build up new high voltage lines. We have a stakeholder challenge, I will come back to that point in a minute. We have a policy challenge, how to provide an appropriate policy regime, as it was mentioned by Rainer for the European level. That's a challenge for the German level as well. And we have the social challenge, how to create public acceptance for that kind of change of given infrastructure. Let me just pick up 3 of the challenges and, of course, associate them with some opportunities that normally go along with challenges. First of all, the challenge of technology, of system integration of renewables. So that's a typical figure, not for the year 2030, that's a typical figure already for 2018 and showing the fluctuations we have already in the electricity system in Germany, and that, of course, creates a kind of technological challenge, how to cover these fluctuations and how to guarantee in the same time system stability. And of course, it leads to a kind of innovation dynamic, and this innovation dynamic helped to keep the system stable. It's really important to say that, in contrary to assumptions that have been on the table 10 or 15 years ago, Germany was able to guarantee system stability even with a strong increase of renewables, of volatile renewables in the system. So some of the factors that can show or that provide some indicators for the system stability have been improved over the last 10 years, and that shows that further increase of renewables is possible without jeopardizing the system stability in countries like Germany. And that was done by some innovative measures in the grid and in the supply side. There's a need for even be more innovative in the next couple of years when fluctuations will grow. We need more flexibility that creates an atmosphere where we might be able to create new technologies. We might be able to come out with new jobs in the system integration field and to be able to export these technologies to other countries that go along this transformation pathway a little bit later. So that's a challenge, of course, but that's associated with a big opportunity to create new technologies, new innovative technologies, and to bring them to the export markets. So some of these technologies have already been invented, like virtual power plants, like more demand-side management, like blockchain as an option, or like happy power hour instruments, flexible electricity tariffs. So these kind of innovations have already been invented over the last couple of years and helped to stabilize the system in Germany. The second challenge is, of course, to overcome persistence forces of established stakeholders and to create and maintain a stable renewable energy market and the associated jobs. So this figure shows the market deployment of renewables in the electricity system over the last 25 years or even 30 years in Germany. And you see again the steep increase of renewables in the electricity sector, starting with roughly 5% 20 years ago, and now we achieved around 40% in the last year. Associated to that, we saw a strong increase in the number of jobs that was highlighted by Rainer already. And at the moment, roughly 350,000 people work in the renewable energy area, and you have to compare that number with just 25,000 people working in the coal area, or less than 8,000 people working in the nuclear business. So it's a big, big number in comparison to other energy sectors. What you see here as well, that from 2011 to 2016, and that's the case for 2018 as well, that the number of jobs decreased, unfortunately. And that's mainly based on the fact that in the PV sector, we lost jobs in the last years because of the strong competition with our Chinese friends that brought very cheap PV models on the market, and German PV modular have not been able, PV manufacturer have not been able to compete with them, so we lost a lot of jobs in that business. But since 2018, we see again a slight increase, even in the PV industry, through high-tech material cells, system integration, hybrid solutions, and system engineering, so that, again, we have the opportunity to create more jobs. It's very important to say that over the last 5 years, even the behavior of the big companies in Germany changed significantly with the progress of the energy transformation pathway. And just to highlight two of the big companies, RWE and E.ON are the two biggest companies we have in the energy sector, and both changed completely their behavior. So RWE was the former coal-based electricity generation company. They now decided to become mainly renewable-based within the next couple of years. And E.ON, another very big utility, they focus will focus in the next years mainly on energy services and the distribution grid. So they totally changed their business portfolio from conventional fuels to renewables and energy services. My last example is about phase out coal and the associated structural change. So Germany decided, and that was mentioned in the opening remarks already, that we will phase out coal in a step-by-step process until the year 2038. And you see here the reduction curve of the installed capacity in Germany, and in red for the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. So it's a step-by-step phase-out program for coal. At the same time, the German government decided to spend a lot of money for that coal mining regions, to give them the chance to create new job opportunities, to become a new energy area of the future, a new energy part of the future, to give them the chance to be in the future not anymore coal-based, but to come up with more energy services, to be an energy service providing region, to be front runner in the sector coupling and power to gas and power to liquid, to be front runner in a hydrogen economy, to give them a chance really to do a structural change process and to become the new front runner in the energy transformation pathway in Germany. One last slide, or two last slides, just summarizing and come out with some concluding remarks. What I try to highlight is that shaping the energy transformation process is not really an easy sledding. It's not a self-dynamic process. You really, a lot of efforts are needed. And the Energiewende, the energy transformation pathway, has to be shaped in a smart and fair way, taking all people's interest into consideration. So just transition is really important, particularly when it comes to the question of how to substitute jobs in the coal mining industry. And contrary to many projections we had on the table, even for Germany, that nowadays we are more or less sure that such kind of energy transformation pathway will lead to more and not to less jobs in the future compared to a business as usual development. The transformation of the energy system cannot make use of existing blueprints. So there's no blueprint where we can just copy and paste what other countries did. And of course, it's confronted with a high complexity, a high dynamic with a huge amount of uncertainties, and that of course requires a continuous monitoring and solid reflection of the progress we made with the energy transformation pathway. And I very often end with citing Woody Allen, a famous American actor. He said once that confidence is before you encompass the problem. So if you go into more details, if you continue with an energy transformation pathway, you will detect more and more problems and challenges. And that's something we should take into consideration, but always keep in mind challenges are associated with opportunities, with new job opportunities, and that's something we observed for Germany in the last couple of years, and I'm sure that's true for Korea as well. Having said that, thank you very much for your attention.